That's one. But the other one, it's to demystify this thing that bad news sells. And he spoke very well, Sam, around, no, I think it came from the floor. This saying that if you want attention, you must behave in a particular way that is not acceptable in the society. You must go and destroy property, ban library in schools because it's the only way to get attention. We must move away from that kind of news that attention is necessarily destroying something you'd get there. So I think there's both ways in terms of managing the censorship. And I think broadly we must look at that and deal with that. Thanks.
Before we take Congress's question,
I think for me, having listened to Thami's points and Sam's, I think it's a two-way stream. Because in as much as we expect the media to report and articulate certain things, we also need to contribute to that. And we need to offer our views. And a very small example we did, especially when this whole RET thing started spinning around. Understanding that OR was an intellectual and a great debater, we have a platform that's called the OR Debate Series. We use that series to invite a number of different sectors to a debate that was trying to say, what exactly is RET? And we brought all players, including government, because we do that under the chapter, the NDP. So when you deal with that, you say, I want government, I want the civil society, business, everybody who should drive the NDP. Everything planned, confirmed, and in place. And the one player that let us down on the 11th hour was government. When we expected that, because it was the seed of where this RET started, that we can have a balanced debate and a balanced understanding, government did not come in to give its voice on what exactly it is. So sometimes it's a two-way stream. The media has its side, but if we don't offer, then we will continue to talk about the problems that we have.
thank you. Congress at last. Just introduce yourself to our others.
Thank you very much. I think I've forgotten my question after such a long discussion. And I never believe that the minority can rule over the majority. But today I've observed that that minority, that side, has been ruling against this minority. I think as we pause and reflect about this African giant and African intellectual, I think we need to take stock of some of the things that he forewarned us about prior to the liberation of this country. And I would want the panelists to reflect on them, particularly when he said, comrades, in as much as it's so easy for us to get and fight for our liberation, but guess what difficult it will be for us to govern our own country. And those words were so prophetic that some of the things that we see today playing themselves, it means that we did not hit to that particular call. We are playing exactly into the same hands, into the warning that he gave us. And I want to direct this question specifically to the bodyguard and the chief bodyguard to reflect on that specific message, whether as a country, have we internalized that particular message? Have we come to the sense that we are really governing this country, or we are further deepening down to chaos and abyss of corruption? Thank you.
And that was Congress Mahlangu, who forgot to introduce himself then. Doctor?
My understanding of that statement, you're quite right, it was so profound. But the underlying issues or the underlying fact about that statement, OR was trying to warn us that we should depend on institutions as opposed to individuals. Because if you set up institutions of good governance, you are unlikely to veer from your path. But if you build personality cult around individuals, you worship individuals, even if they do wrong things, you'd keep on worshiping them. That's the warning that OR was sending to us. Now, we have, I must say, to a large extent, we've built independent institutions, built checks and balances in our system. Are they strong enough to withstand any form of abuse? In the last few years, we've seen certainly not. There are challenges in that respect. So the clarion call to all of us is really to endeavor to build institutions of good governance. And I think there's a mission, and that's what we can leave for generations to come, because we have done our share, most of us in this room, to fight for this freedom. We fought for it, we have attained it. Have we really taken it upon ourselves to build the institutions that will ensure that this democracy would withstand any dictatorial tendencies that may emerge in future? I don't think we've done enough, and I think that's what we need to do. That's what causes states to become weak and eventually to collapse. The collapsing of state, it's a man-made process. It doesn't happen automatically, and warnings are there. You must read a book by a guy called Robert Rothbeck, When State Fails. If you read that book, Rothbeck tells you about, the book was written in 1999. And I looked at the book twice, actually. He speaks about elements of states starting to fail as failure to deliver textbooks. And I thought he was writing about Limpopo because we had the same challenge. So I looked back at the book. When was this book written? Potholes and so on. Elements that we're starting to see, but how we rise into this challenge and manage those issues. And I think we ought to have an open discussion about the weakening of our state institutions and how are we contributing to weaken the state institutions. And I think that's what OR was warning us about, that the difficult thing would be to build state institutions. Remember, as you build this institution, sometimes the building of institutions may go against my personal interests. But there's a collective interest that we must take care of, not mine only, in building the capacity of state institutions across the board.
Thank you, Lilo.
Yes, my name is Lila Magnus. I'm from SABC Radio News. I would like to know from the panel, if anyone can answer me, what do you think Mr. Tambo would say if you could see our media now? If you could see, especially where the SABC is and the private-owned media, and how stories are sometimes placed, or what do you call it? When someone, what do you call it? I don't know. Manipulated, when like the Rogue Unit SARS story, where a story is,
Where narratives are placed.
thank you, planted.
Yeah,
That's the word.
planted,
That's the
yeah.
word. About stories that are planted, and then about the shallowing of journalism in South Africa, especially with social media, where people dial a quote and it's 2 lines, and there's just, because the frequency of the news that must go out, there's just not enough time to go deep into an issue. Thank you.
That's what you refer to, Mr. Ntenteni, the dollar quote.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to be straight and blunt and to the point. I think those in charge of the SABC have betrayed the principles and the values of public service broadcasting. The SABC is a statutory institution, and whatever it does is governed by statute. And whilst I work in Radio Freedom, I also worked at the SABC, and I was responsible for the 18 public service broadcasting stations in my previous life. It is for me very, very, very painful that an organization, as I have said, that so understood the importance and the role of communication to the extent that it established Radio Freedom under very difficult circumstances. Radio Freedom was a radio within another radio. We broadcast from Zambia, we broadcast from Madagascar, we broadcast from Ethiopia, we broadcast from Angola, we broadcast from Tanzania. All of these areas, Radio Freedom was broadcasting from all of these areas. But that today, when we have a public institution that is owned by the South African people, which could be used to inform the people of South Africa, has been allowed to deteriorate to the extent that it has, is, for lack of a better word, shameful.
I think earlier on, Thami spoke about the incident where an NEC member had complained to OR about the kind of reporting and how OR listened to the process they were running And this was not a process imposed by OR on the team, but it was a process defined by the team based on the trust OR put in them, but them experiencing how OR behaved in general. So for me, I always find it difficult to answer a question like that that says, what do you think OR would have said? Because I don't know. But all I would do with the SABC, I would say OR propagated strongly for truth. He was very courageous against all odds to give the truth. So if the SABC does that, I would tick. If they don't, I would put a question mark. He believed in integrity. He was highly ethical. You've got the story of the 8 journalists. There was courage, there was standing for truth. Those are the things that you saw the SABC muffling down. So you would not tick that point for the SABC. So for me, whenever I'm confronted with trying to understand an issue and how he would have related, I look at his values. If I could tick the majority of his values against that, then I know we're on the right track. But if I'm doubtful about the fundamentals of what guided his life, then I know we are probably veering in the wrong direction given today's context, because I cannot purely translate what he did then to today, but I'm guided by his values.
Thank you, colleagues. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We can still take the discussion offline. I'm just going to give each of the panelists short 2 sentences concluding remark, please, Doctor.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening to some of the things that we were saying here. But I think one thing that we should leave with here is it's that institutions are much bigger than all of us, and we should endeavor to protect and build these institutions of good governance as a country. And that's the only heritage that will leave for future generations. Thank you.
I think just echoing what Kingsley said, I like the institution strengthening, but I think in whatever we deal with, if as long as we draw strength from being clear about the truthfulness and the correctness of what we do and stay resilient and consistent, because I think that's one pressure the media finds itself against, and all of us. It's about being consistent and consistently repeating that which we believe in spite of what the comebacks are and what the environment is, and I think we'll get it right.
Mr. Ntenteni?
Thank you very much. I think what I'm going to say will dovetail on what Sislingi has said. I think we're trapped in a situation where we rely to a very great extent on practice and tradition. And practice is something that can work in one set of circumstances and may not work in another set of circumstances. I think we need to distinguish between practice and principle, because a principle is an external truth that is reliable as a physical law. If you internalize principle, it becomes a value, and you begin to live by those values. Thank you.
Sam?
I want to state the issue of the freedom we have, something we shouldn't take lightly. We should enjoy it, and so that we can develop these great nations to be what someone like OR Tambo wanted it to be. We need to interrogate a lot of the things that are happening and within the proper context of a country governed by a former liberation movement, with the history that we have, a painful history. And when we look at our faults and the flaws that we're looking at, and also be fair in looking at the positives that are there, we enjoy a whole lot of freedom. The right to know is your right. It's not the right of the media. When you know about KPMG, you have to remember that you know of it because you have that right to know, and it's being delivered to you because that right is there. It was created by people like Tambo. Thank you.